Yeah, they just.
Okay. Oh, I guess we start in a minute. You guys are ready anytime I bounce on it, though, right?
Anytime you go.
Lisa, you're ready? Mm-hmm. Okay. We'll wait a couple more seconds, just in case. Okay. Good evening and welcome to the weekly Lawrence City Commission meeting. I want to wish everybody the happiest of holiday seasons. I can't preach enough about safety during this time. Like I always say, check on your neighbors, check on your friends, and enjoy this season. It's a wonderful time. Make everybody feel happy. It's a good time of year. So anyway, first item on the agenda is the consent agenda, and all matters listed on the consent agenda are to be considered under one motion, will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on those items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from consent agenda and will be considered separately. Are there any items on the consent agenda that a member of the commission would like to have removed for separate consideration?
Number 7.
7. Okay. Any other items a member of the commission would like to have removed for separate consideration? Any item that a member of the public would like to have removed for separate consideration from the consent agenda? Okay, so with the exception of item number 7, which is the acceptance of a dedication of easements associated with the final plat of Gwaltney Addition located at 2176 East 23rd Street, 2200 East 23rd and 2200 Street FF, and the addition of claims to 237 vendors, which includes the payroll-related payments, in the amount of $7,300,463.51. With the exception of item 7, addition of claims, I would entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item 7, the addition of claims. Made by Commissioner Herbert, second by Commissioner Larson. All in favor of that motion, aye? Aye. Opposed? That passes 5-0. Again, item 7 is the acceptance of dedications of easements associated with the final plat I referenced. Vice Mayor, questions?
Yeah, I saw on here, it mentions the ownership as on behalf of Cave Inn LLC. And when I think of the cave, I think of the Oriad Inn, and I didn't know if I was making assumptions, or do we know the ownership of the Cave Inn LLC?
Yes, it's, the Gwaltney Addition is the owner of the former roofing company, and
So it doesn't have
It's
anything to
not.
do with the bar, the cave?
No.
I just wanted to make sure of that.
It does
Thank
not.
you.
Okay. Any other questions on that item? Any public comment on that item? Okay, I would accept, if there's no other questions, I would accept acceptance of the dedication of easements associated with the final plat of Gwaltney Edition.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second to accept the dedications of easements associated with the final plat of Gwaltney Edition, made by Vice Mayor Soden, second by Commissioner Herbert. All in favor of that motion, aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0. Next item is general public comment. Public is allowed to speak on to any of the items or to any items or issues that are not scheduled on the agenda after first being recognized by the mayor. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss, debate those items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. They will be referred to, items will be referred to staff for follow-up if necessary. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, and state their name and address, and speakers should address all comments and questions to the commission. So are there any general public comments tonight on items that are not on our agenda? Frank?
My name is Frank Jansen, 33, New Hampshire. I'm going to talk briefly about recycling in Lawrence. About a year ago, Diefenbaugh was taken out of the picture and the Lawrence Recycling came in to do the curbside recycling. I've been in touch with them every now and then over the years, the recycling people here in Lawrence. Downtown, the recycling bins, the blue ones, often get contaminated, but they take care of that. I asked them about putting bins in South Park. That's the same problem, they said, with recycling bins that might be contaminated. What I want to do was talk about businesses. The business aspect of this hasn't been dealt with yet. The people who are in charge of recycling here in Lawrence, they're trying to get things arranged to present to you guys, the City Commission, the funding for the business recycling. I go to Dillon's, which is 4 blocks from my house. They used to have recycling bins, but the bins are now just waste. Because Diefenbaugh pulled out, City of Lawrence has not yet come in to accept their recyclables at Dillon's. Mentioning Dillon's, you also want to give equal time to Checkers that gives 10 cents when you're bringing your own bag. Dillon's doesn't. So what I want you guys to do is to look at that. They have told me that in the early months of next year, they plan to present you a proposal of how much to charge for businesses around town. But just to let you know, if you can get on that and help them with that situation for next year. Thanks.
Thanks, Frank. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Bob Harrington, and I live at 2023 Hogan Drive in Lawrence. I've lived in town here for 37 years. Drive a lot in town. And there are other people who are driving too, but some of them are driving bicycles. And I noticed in the City Commission's agenda that in the past few weeks there was about $28,000 that was assigned to new bicycles, signage for, with regard to bicycles, and making sure that people are aware of bikes on the road. I also see more lanes for bicycles around town, and that's great because I think we need to have people using alternative forms of transportation. But what I don't see is any statements that say that bicyclists have as much responsibility as cars to conduct themselves responsibly as drivers, to be lit at night, both front and back and on the side, not to be wearing black clothes when they're riding their bicycles at night, not to be going through stop signs and stoplights. They need to operate like a vehicle. And if they want equal access to the road, which is fine, they need to operate like they're going to be safe drivers. And I think that's important. So when I see the signs and when I hear about the signs going up, that puts all the onus on the drivers. But if a driver gets in an accident with a bicyclist, or even if a pedestrian gets in an accident with a bicyclist and the bicyclist does harm to the pedestrian, how does that pedestrian recover from a bicyclist who's not covered by insurance, who's driven with great hazard, going through a stop sign and so forth? And it happens. So I guess I'd like to see that issue brought up more in the City Commission with regard to responsibility of bicyclists toward their own safety and the safety of others.
Bob, I appreciate that. We are establishing a new committee, a new Transportation Commission that's going to start meeting over the next several weeks. the appointments will be made to that committee. I'll finish making those on January 3rd, the next time that we meet. And so there is going to be an avenue that, general discussion can happen there through not only bicycles and cars, but also pedestrians too. So
Well, that's.
we'll make sure
pedestrians should be
that, we'll make
included.
sure that that's on an agenda.
Yeah,
right
and
away.
I'm not anti-bicycles.
No, I understand.
I think that's great, but it's for their own safety and for the safety of pedestrians and also cars. Nobody wants to hit a bicyclist.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Other general public comment? Yes, sir. No.
Dan Dannenberg, 2702 University Drive. I just want to support the previous speaker's point. As one who has almost hit two cyclists with his car, in one instance the cyclist just roared through his stop sign, and I happened to see him, and I stopped before I hit him. Had I hit him, I was not going very fast, but it probably would have injured him pretty severely, maybe even killed him. On another occasion, the guy just was out, I don't know, he just almost swerved in front of my car, and I happened to see him, and I slowed and stopped while he collected himself and steered on down the street. Whatever commission, we're good at establishing commissions. I mean, we need a commission on commissions. And it's not going to help unless we have some sort of enforcement mechanism to keep bicyclists acting responsibly when they ride. I know we like to have bicyclists on sidewalks because they can just along and pedestrians watch out. But we need to have some sort of control over what bicyclists are doing. And the man's point about bicyclists not being visible at night is well taken. If you're lucky, you will see a bicyclist with a little red rear light flashing on the back, and that doesn't get it. You need to be well lit, front, back, and they need to have reflective gear on, so when your car headlights fall on it, you get a good view of what's in front of you. And until we do that and establish some really particular standards, I could stand up here and give standards. We don't need another commission. We already have a bicycle commission or whatever. I call it the Commission on Idiots on Two Wheels. So I think we need to do something more to keep bicyclists responsible.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Sarah Taliaferro, and my address is 2145 New Hampshire Street. I'm a member of Plymouth Congregational Church, and I serve on Justice Matters Affordable Housing Steering Committee. I'm here tonight with other representatives from Justice Matters Affordable Housing Committee, and I'd like to invite them to stand, which they are now doing. We bring this message together on behalf of Justice Matters. First, we want you to know that people of faith with Justice Matters are as committed as ever to ending the affordable housing shortage in Lawrence. This fall, we once again organized dozens of small house meetings across the city, hosted by our 22 partnering congregations and faith-based organizations. And in those gatherings, we were listening to the concerns and personal stories of our members. We shared last Monday with the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, and we want to share today with the entire commission. And we wanted to say that when it comes to housing, the struggle is ongoing. In our house meetings across the city, we heard from working parents who have had to move in with adult children because they can't make it on their own. We heard from families who want to live in Lawrence but can't afford the cost of housing and are forced to live elsewhere. We heard from our members who have experienced homelessness, as well as from those who are struggling to keep up with mortgage payments as costs of homeownership rise. We heard from those who have experienced foreclosure and from those whose housing costs are preventing them from saving for retirement. We heard about the struggle for housing from those living with disabilities, student debt, physical and mental illness, criminal record, unemployment, and victims of domestic violence. Affordable housing remains a top priority for us, not simply as an expression of our work for justice for the most vulnerable, but because as members of this community, the struggle is our struggle. I can speak to this personally. I feel deeply about affordable housing for many reasons. Although I was born in Lawrence and have spent most of my life here, I did live in a time in rural Pennsylvania. At one point, newly divorced and working the night shift in a quality control lab, I was able to move back out of my parents' house because I found a tiny apartment for $125 a month. I had $10 a week for gas and groceries. People anonymously left bags of groceries on my doorstep. Fast forward to now and to here in the city of Lawrence, and I see the same small town community support that I experienced back then in that town in Pennsylvania. But my single mom friends, for example, all of who have what would be called good jobs, struggle to maintain their little families because the lack of housing they can afford in a city where the cost of living is high. This struggle is our struggle. So why are we all here tonight in particular? We're here to step back and reflect on the progress that has been made on affordable housing in 2016 and to look ahead with hope for 2017. This has been a significant year for affordable housing in Lawrence. This commission moved affordable housing forward by shifting resources for 2017 to the top 5 priorities you had established in the 2016 budget, including affordable housing, economic development, infrastructure, transit, and non-motorized transportation, public safety, and mental health. Mayor Amyx and Vice Mayor Soden, when you came to the Nehemiah Assembly in April, you affirmed that affordable housing was a priority for the city, and you promised to do everything in your power to help us solve the affordable housing shortage in a reasonable time frame. Thank you for your leadership you have offered, and thank you to the entire commission for investing $1.65 million in affordable housing through the capital improvement plan over the next 5 years. We are grateful for this important step forward. At last week's Affordable Housing Advisory Board meeting, the board voted to adopt a series of goals to guide their upcoming work. We consider this significant progress for affordable housing in 2016 as well. While we realize that the advisory board's goals are a starting point for a discussion that is larger than the board itself, we wish to acknowledge the contribution the advisory board is making to this issue. We would underscore in particular the board's goal to end the affordable housing shortage in Lawrence within 10 years. To establish and to strive toward this goal is exactly the kind of courageous and visionary leadership we need. We know that it would be easy to say that solving a problem like affordable housing is just too complex to tackle. We know, too, that it would be easy to avoid setting a time frame for a solution to this problem. A deadline turns up the heat. It creates a sense of urgency and expectation that can be uncomfortable. We also know that the work of governing is not for the faint-hearted. Effective leadership demands and requires the willingness to cast a vision, to adopt strategies, and to risk. It's always easier just to stay home, to criticize from the sidelines, or to keep one's vision small and manageable. But when this is our city, and when we care about our neighbors and our family and the members of this community, at some point, slow and small just isn't good enough. We continue to believe that you are the right commission at the right time to reclaim Lawrence as a home for people of all incomes. We believe you are on the right track. that the Affordable Housing Advisory Board is on the right track, and we hope that despite the inevitable bumps along the road, you will not give up. We pray that you will claim the advisory board's goal to end the affordable housing shortage in 10 years' time, no matter where we have to look to find the money. As we prepare to enter 2017, we want to ask you to encourage city staff and the Affordable Housing Advisory Board to prioritize the search for funding sources for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The board has said they will identify 5 funding sources in addition to the capital improvement plan by the end of the first quarter. Will you do whatever you can to support them, bless them, spur them on in this endeavor? This is a concrete way that we can take the next step forward. 1.65 million is a solid start, but we know it will take significantly more than that to solve this problem. We need all our best brain power collaborating to discover the funding strategies that are right for Lawrence. Thank you for your leadership and your time. Bless you and your families as you celebrate the holidays. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Without missing anybody, we need to thank Tom Markus and our staff for the work that they did through the budget process and being able to find funds to be able to do that. So special thanks to our staff, too. Okay. Any other general public comment? Okay. We are on to the regular agenda. Regular agenda, the public is allowed to speak on any of the regular agenda items or give public comment after first being recognized by the mayor. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, state their name and address, and speakers should address all comments and questions to the commission. First item is to consider changes and propose reorganization of the city's economic development policies. Diane.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. This item, as you know, is a culmination of a lot of discussions amongst the City Commission and various advisory boards over the last year and a half or so. And it's coming to you this evening with some recommendations from city staff and then the input that's been assembled from all of these groups throughout these meetings. I wanted to highlight for you at kind of a high level 6 different issues and kind of go through those. The fact that this is a new policy document and the formatting is different. I wanted to cover fees, the but-for requirements, the disclosures and notices that have been added as requirements in the draft, a bit about the NRA policy, and also touch on affordable housing. First, the document that is in front of you is a new consolidated document for economic development, and it replaces the former policies that were adopted in various resolutions, and there were also several provisions in the city code. So this puts it all in one place, with the beginning part being the overarching elements that really express the city's general policies on economic development and provisions that apply to all of the different policies. And then it's formatted with each section then that follows that covers each of the tools for economic development and the various processes and procedures that apply to each of those tools. We also went through this document. Legal staff, particularly Randy Larkin, assisted a lot in the cleanup and organization of each of the sections in order to make them flow congruently, so that when you look at each of the tools, the process is in the same place, the application materials and those requirements are all in the same place in each of the sections. We're proposing that this document be adopted by resolution and thus repeal the current policy resolutions, and also would incorporate the sections of city code which would require the repeal of those sections that are now included in this policy resolution by the ordinance that's in front of you this evening. We are proposing that the city leave in the code the provisions that relate to the Public Incentive Review Committee. That's why there's none of that information that's provided here. It is in the city code. The other thing that I wanted to say is that The policy calls for the periodic review of the policies related to economic development. I know there was some discussion about whether we should be specific on a time frame of review. Staff is suggesting that we just say that it would be periodic as opposed to be on a definite calendar, and that avoids us maybe missing a year or some kind of time frame. Next, regarding fees, there were several changes with regard to fees throughout the policies that we wanted to highlight. First, there were no changes to the tax abatement fees as presented. For industrial revenue bonds, we have proposed the implementation of an origination fee with the ability of the City Commission to waive that fee when it involves a project for a recognized nonprofit, so for example, the Lawrence Memorial Hospital, or a project that is primarily creating affordable housing, or a project that is creating primary jobs. So that would be at your discretion. We propose no changes to the CID fees, but to the TDD, we're proposing application and administration fees that would be congruent with the CID fees. So we're just mirroring that application fee and those administrative fees that would accrue on an annual basis. And in that, we're recognizing that there's staff work related to processing the application and then also processing those payments on an annual basis. With the TIF policy, we did propose a new application fee and an administrative fee related to processing the increment. And again, trying to recognize that there is staff time involved in those. Also, with regard to the NRA policy, which previously did not have an application fee, we're recommending a flat $500 fee rather than the tiered fee that had previously been suggested. As we visited with this about legal staff, the thought was that we needed to be consistent with the application of that fee, irregardless of the size of the project, so that we don't differentiate on that note. We also would propose the reimbursement of half of the fee to the applicant in the event that the project is not considered by the City Commission. Overall, with regard to fees, I will note that the policy does require the applicants to be responsible for the analytical fees that are involved in processing their application. So in the case of a number of these that require the gap analysis, for example, there would be additional fees related to that. Other fees such as bond counsel fees, state processing fees when the state is involved in considering a property tax abatement, for example. Those would all be requirements that the applicant would be required to fulfill. The but-for requirements, was a lot of discussion about that during the process. Staff doesn't recommend requiring the but-for analysis related to property tax abatements or industrial revenue bonds. So that is not reflected in the draft that you have before you. With regard to the NRA, the TDD, and the CID, all of those do require but-for analysis if they're not a primary job creation project or if they are not a primarily affordable housing project. With the TIF, a but-for is required as part of the statutorily required feasibility analysis, so that would be included in that. With regard to disclosures and notices, we made quite a few changes both to the policy and to the application form that I wanted to highlight. First, there would be a public benefit checklist that would be part of the application, so the applicant would be required to identify the public benefit of the project. Next, there would be an ownership disclosure on the application that would require each principal, partner, or member who owns or will own 5% more of the company to be identified. And then the applicant would be required to sign an affidavit, a statement, that the city would not grant there's a statement in the policy that the city would not grant an economic development incentive where the applicant is delinquent on any real property tax and any property within the state, or any special assessments on any property within the state. And then the applicant would not be required to, would not be able to be delinquent on any debts or any obligations that would be owed to the city, utility bills, those kinds of things, or would have any federal or state tax liens. And then finally, there would be a requirement that the applicant would complete an affidavit that would be attached to the application where the applicant would certify all of these things to the city. And in visiting with legal staff, we believe that that is the best way to ensure that those provisions would be followed. With regard to the NRA policy, there was quite a lot of discussion about that. Staff would recommend that the amount and duration of the NRA be based on the merits of the project as determined by the gap analysis that would be performed. So the draft language in the policy in front of you reflects this recommendation, and I wanted to point out that it does remove the 50% 10-year baseline criteria that is in the current policy. The other major provision that's a change to the policy relates to affordable housing and the requirement of affordable housing when there is an economic development incentive for a project that involves 4 or more residential units. So I want to emphasize that it's only in the case of projects that have 4 or more residential units. So not a project that would be primarily job creation related, primary jobs, those kind of things. So in these cases where there's 4 or more residential units, there are some provisions included related to completing, adding affordable housing as part of the project. And we've had several discussions about this. The Affordable Housing Advisory Board made some recommendations in October related to the inclusion of language in your policy. That language that they provided in October is included in the policy that's in front of you. We also did add a clarification to that language that would add the source document for the income limits that are used in the policy, and that's in order to avoid confusion as to where we look every time that we're looking at those income guidelines. So that's reflected in the draft that you have in front of you this evening and was just recently updated. Additionally, in your packet, there is another memo from the Affordable Housing Advisory Board with regard to recommendations that they made at their December meeting, so last week, related to this policy, and they were making some revisions to their recommendations. And so at this time, I would ask if Casey would cover those recommendations for you, and then at the conclusion of her remarks, I will be available for any questions that you have, as will Brett.
Thanks, Diane. Mayor and Commissioners, Casey Toomay, Assistant City Manager. As Diane mentioned, our Affordable Housing Board originally looked at this proposed policy back in October and provided some recommendations that you all discussed at your work session. But then based on some of the feedback at commission discussion and feedback in the public that the board received after discussion of the 2 recent economic development proposals that had affordable housing components, they wanted to look back at their recommendations and see if there were any changes or additional comments that they might make that would help you all try to get at addressing some of the comments and questions that came up during those discussions. So they went back and looked at their original recommendations, which primarily focused on the income levels of the people that the housing components were aimed at addressing, and discussed that it might be helpful to add 2 additional components that, instead of looking at the income of the individuals, looked at the rent that would be charged for any rental units that would be involved in these proposals. And what the Affordable Housing Board is suggesting now is that additional language be included to require that rent for affordable rental housing units would not exceed the maximum fair market rent that is established each year by the Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority. We can talk a little bit more about what that means in just one second. The second component related to that rent, and this is kind of related, is that applicants receiving incentives would not be able to deny any Section 8 vouchers for the affordable rental housing units that would be included in any project that was covered by this policy.
Is that only for the affordable housing units? So the rest of the units, they could reject Section 8?
Well, that's what this policy talks about, is the units covered by the incentive. I think that the Affordable Housing Board has discussed maybe coming back to at a future date with a proposal that would talk about that larger kind of idea. There are communities where that kind of Section 8 voucher is a protected class, for lack of a better term, and that's, I think, outside of the scope of what their recommendations were at this point. They were mainly looking at it related to this incentive policy. So to talk a little bit about the fair market rent, and Shannon Oury is here from the Housing Authority and can certainly speak about this probably better than I, but just to give you a quick overview, what HUD does to calculate that fair market rent is take census data on all of the rents charged in the Lawrence MSA. So it's, again, looking just at the Lawrence Douglas County MSA. They take all of the rents and put them all in a line and establish what the 40th percentile is. So the way that it made sense to me in my mind was to make a little chart. So a lot of times we talk about the median, which another way to talk about the median is that that's the 50th percentile. So what you'll see on this chart here is 10 hypothetical rents, and we'll just pretend that there are only 10 rental units in the entire Lawrence MSA that are one bedroom, and that when the last census was collected, the minimum and the maximum there, which we pulled off of a Keller real estate report, for a one-bedroom rental unit were $400 on the one end and $1,005 on the other end. So when you calculate the median, you look at, it's right in the middle. There's just as many people that pay more than that amount as pay less. That's the 50th percentile, or in this case, $660. What HUD says is that we don't want to look at the 50th percentile, we want to look at the 40th percentile. So the point at which 4 rents are lower and 6 rents are higher. And for our most recent year, 2016, that number for Lawrence was $639. Does that make sense to everybody, how that's calculated? What our Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority then does is says, that's not a big enough market based on what rents really are here. So they allow people to use their vouchers to up to 110% of that fair market rent, or $703 there, represented by that green arrow. So what they're in fact doing is creating a larger eligible market for people to use the different voucher programs through the Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority. What our board is suggesting is that we use that same number, which this shows you the one-bedroom number. It does change based on the number of bedrooms in the unit. What they're suggesting is that our incentive policy would also use this for the maximum rents that would be eligible for any rental unit in one of those projects. Some of the advantages are that then, as we said, the eligibility for housing vouchers would align with that. I think there's some convenience there from a user standpoint, that then people who have those vouchers would be eligible to live in the projects that we would be providing that incentive for. So there's some value, I think, there that you might want to consider. Also, just the simplicity's sake of, this is a number that HUD puts out every year, that the Housing Authority keeps on their website, that we can link back to and show to folks, that gets indexed every year as changes happen in the market. Another advantage is This really does look at our actual market, so it's very local data. And I think it accounts for the different types of units that we have in our community. So whether it's brand new construction, 5-year-old housing or 50-year-old housing, if it's renting in our community, then the data should be reflected here.
So on fair market rent, they're talking about the community as a whole, not just the specific geographic region where the project is being built, correct?
Correct.
Does that include utilities?
It does. These numbers all include utilities.
So it doesn't matter the number of people that would be in this unit, it's only about based on the rent of Lawrence, Kansas.
That's correct.
And the number of bedrooms.
The number of
Well,
bedrooms,
the number of
right.
bedrooms, yeah.
And again, I'm showing you here the one bedroom, but then
And the data you have here is, these are made-up numbers, correct?
again, the minimum and the maximum rent are from a report that we have from Keller and Associates,
So
I think is
the numbers
source.
you have presented here are accurate.
The 639 is the HUD fair market rent for 2016 for the Lawrence MSA.
Okay. I'm just thinking of the project that was approved not too long ago that had $940 for a one-bedroom, which is pretty far on the right there.
It would have exceeded that, that's
But
correct.
I think, in fact, I think it was you, Matt, one of the things that you brought up several weeks ago is we needed to establish what this number was going to be. I think staff and the board has come together and said, we need to match what the housing authority is doing so that there's a consistency throughout, and that is the one thing that we've done. So I think in a question that you brought up several weeks ago, I think this takes care of that. Unless I'm missing something.
No,
And that could happen.
This would have
But-
been neat 60 days ago.
It would have. But, I think the fact that we had that discussion, and you
Yeah.
brought up a very good point, that we needed to establish that figure, probably a long time ago. But, I think that didn't go on an ear that wasn't being heard. The board said, okay, we're going to get to that figure, and all these folks came up with that figure, and I think it's a reasonable way to go.
And Shannon, I don't know if you want to add anything, or Brad Carr and Danelle Dressler, who also help with the Affordable Housing Board, are here too, that if they have comments, but. The last kind of addition or modification to the recommendation of the board talks about back with the income. So again, it maintains that we're trying to target individuals at 60% or below area median income. This isn't a change from their original recommendation. And then for home ownership units, 80% or below of the HUD area median income. Again, we've provided a source to those numbers. But what they also wanted to do was make a clarification that all housing costs, so if there are HOA fees or other fees like that, principal and interest and utilities, all of those things together must not exceed 30% of the household income when we're talking about the eligibility for people who these incentives are trying to provide housing for. Other questions?
Questions? She likes math questions. Go ahead. Did you have a
Questions for
question?
Diane's
Sure, please.
presentation.
Please.
Now's
Thanks,
the
Casey.
appropriate time for that. Dan, you had mentioned part of this policy will cover looking into outstanding property tax debt an individual may have that's seeking an incentive. Do we have any provision as part of this policy that a discovered delinquency after the fact could trigger a clawback?
We will have an affidavit, is what we're recommending, where the applicant would be stating that at the time of application, that they have none of these delinquencies or any of the other issues that we have identified. I would maybe see if Tony has any thoughts on, do you mean if something happened?
I'm not trying to use a specific example, but I have a specific example in
If
mind
during-
where we've discovered an individual that has outstanding property tax debt going back 5 years, and in a 5-year period has received, through separate LLCs, property tax abatements. My question would be, at the point of discovery, can we claw back on
I understand. I think the answer is yes, because we would have the affidavit if this new provision is approved in hand that would say that they would have needed to disclose that to us.
And would that require, would the wording of that legally be that the individual themselves has outstanding property tax debt, or would an individual that is part of an LLC that has outstanding debt and is applying as a separate LLC, would they be excluded from that provision because the LLCs are separate? Because, I mean, legally, isn't that the idea of the
on
LLC?
drafting it, but maybe I can jump in. I think
I think what we were doing is we were looking at any LLC, and they have to, of course, you're not going to immediately be able to know all of that, which makes the affidavit as a part of the application so critical. And as to the clawback, once it's been issued, I would suggest to you that we may not amend tonight, but that's something that we may want to come back and add some specificity to make sure that that's clear. And I think it has a double advantage. One, obviously, it makes it very clear, but the other is it gives a very strong warning to any applicant that that can happen.
Yeah, I just want to
Which
make
is
sure
further a
that
deterrent.
you can't duck out of a debt merely by establishing a separate LLC. And I know legally speaking, oftentimes that's the case, that a separate LLC separates you from the previous.
It's our intent that that is not the case.
Okay.
So if we have to add specific information that spells that out,
Okay.
whether it's done as a part of this approval or as a further amendment, we'll come back and do that.
Okay.
I recommend that to you.
Isn't that something that could be done each year when they have to do the report to the city? Where they actually, at that point, when they submit their
Refile an
report?
affidavit on an
Right.
annualized basis, that's not a bad approach. I've seen that.
An LLC doesn't completely separate an individual. If it has to do with deceit or something like that, then you are still liable.
That's
I
not what we
think
found with the Eldridge
If
situation.
we call it out, I think, why leave any vagueness to it? I think we probably are better off making sure that those circumstances are called out, and we say that if you're a 5% in a distinct LLC from the one you applied for, that still applies, this provision still applies, so.
Yeah, because we dealt with that question when we were looking at the IRB for the Eldridge in the midst of the Oriad situation. There are many similarities, but because it was a separate LLC, we were told from legal staff that we could not, effectively, we could not have punitive measure against one as a result of the other. And that's what I'm
Right, but
trying
I'm
to.
talking about the developer that, Fairfield Estates, I think it's called, the LLC. That's not an LLC that you can just close and then not be responsible for those debts. That there is times that even though it's an LLC, the individual owners are still responsible for the debts for that LLC. I don't mean for a different LLC.
But the idea that Tom says that no matter what we do tonight on this policy change, expect recommendation that is going to clear up the matter through the affidavit, so.
Right.
I think those are valid points that you're having discussions about. And I think as much as we try to be transparent, I think we want to be transparent about our expectations of persons that are applying and then receiving, that if we find it, we have an obligation to bring it back and take action on that.
I just want to make sure people know that an LLC doesn't excuse you from anything related to that LLC. It's not the total firewall that people would like it to be.
Well,
So it's limited liability.
I suspect that's why
Still
people do
liability.
use multiple LLCs, because they're trying to separate distinct
Right.
responsibilities,
Right.
liabilities, ownership.
Sure.
And so they're doing that, and I think that makes it incumbent on us to make it very clear
Yeah.
that it's our view that those are not for purposes of escaping this responsibility.
Are
Something to do
we
with state
limiting
income
limiting
tax.
ownership to 5% or more when we're asking about compliance with taxes and.
That's been our tradition, and I think that's what's called out here,
Yes, that's what we,
So will people start doing LLCs at 4%?
at 4.99.
Yeah.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
There isn't a law that is made that somebody isn't going to
I know.
take a run at. That's why you have amendment provisions to come back and deal with that.
But you feel pretty comfortable that upon adoption tonight, we could add that prior to a second reading?
As long as that's permissible under your procedure, yeah, I'd say that's the way I'd suggest you go about it. We've been talking about this process for a long time. We need to make progress
Get it
towards
going.
getting it
Yeah.
implemented.
Yeah.
This is a resolution, so it's in a resolution form. So there is not a second reading of a resolution, but we could, in short order, bring back a revised resolution.
Okay.
I think it's important to start getting it going, and then there may be things that happen in the future that we might need to revise the ordinance somehow, but it's hard to sit here and do every what-if scenario. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else of Diane? Matt, you have something else?
No.
Oh, okay,
I had a question
okay.
of Casey.
Please.
Is that okay? Casey, the handouts that were attached to the packet this afternoon, the charts, are those updated every year, or how are they done?
That's correct. They are updated every year. The timing is different for the fair market rent than when the HUD income limits come out, because they use a different the different fiscal year than we do. So, but they are every 12 months.
Okay, great.
I have a question for Casey, too.
Please.
I was jotting down some ideas. So I was asking about the Section 8 vouchers, and that for a project that we approved incentives for that had an affordable housing part in it, and then the Section 8 is only for those units. Is it possible to make it that the whole project is eligible for Section 8?
I'm not sure.
I mean, I don't know if I know enough about Section 8 to even,
I'm not sure that we could, I mean, I guess we could look at that about writing the policy that way. The board's recommendation was that it would only apply to the units themselves, but
Yeah,
I
Tom?
don't know, Tom.
So we had quite a lengthy discussion about this, and in a previous place, we got to the point where we made it a protected class, which essentially means that you can't discriminate on the basis of using a Section 8 voucher. One of the big challenges that came back from the landlords was, well, what is the utilization rate of Section 8 vouchers? And from what we were able to glean, it approaches 99%. So you get into this, so what are you trying to achieve? Personally, I like the idea that you can't use that as a reason not to rent to somebody, but it appears that there's enough market for availability that they're at close to a 99% utilization rate. So
You're also going to have budgetary implications on a policy like that, because as it sits right now, our rental registration program waives the fee at the point at which you're Section 8 approved. So you're talking about $17 per unit eliminated. So I mean, there's a pretty considerable budgetary consideration there.
I just think that you need to think that through. I think it is a separate and distinct conversation. And I think the way I understand it, the advisory board was going to take that and continue to have that discussion about that.
good.
But I would, at this point, follow the recommendation of the board and refer it or require it for the individual unit, and not for the building at large. The other thing that I think is important, and I'm kind of speaking to you, Leslie, because I know in the past you've used the 50% argument, and when you look at this policy, some of the provisions of the policy are actually going to push us on that 50%. Using this new market rental, which means lesser income, means your gap is larger, meaning your incentive. Now, that then goes to the whole public purpose argument, okay?
Right.
So you have to keep that in mind as this is being adopted, that being very rigid on 50%, and I'm not suggesting you are, I'm suggesting you have to be willing to look at what the gap analysis shows you is a fair market return for somebody that's going to provide this.
Sure.
And over time, I'd like to see, this is just one other factor in this whole affordable housing quest, right? And over time, you may ratchet up to, additional percentage as to the total number of units in a building as we move forward. But I'd like to see some successes with this first and then move to that level. I think this really does address that whole issue about what a reasonable rent is that Matt was really honed in on previously. So in retrospect, I think this kind of works better in addition to the consistency that Mike points out between, the housing authority and us in terms of what that terminology is for affordable.
Well, I'm happy to go along with the policies that we're looking at now. I guess what I want to kind of make clear why I'm bringing these things up is for the Affordable Housing Committee, the members that are here listening to that they can hear the things that I'm kind of interested in. Because one of the things that I'm also concerned about is that we're incentivizing one-bedroom units as well. And I think that really targeting the sizes of units for new construction. I think that, how many one-bedroom apartments have we approved in the last year or two? I think that perhaps people needing one bedrooms, that might be better served for Section 8 vouchers. And then for new building, new construction, we get more of the 2, 3, maybe even 4-bedroom units that we might be needing. So I think that's really important.
I think that is another part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And I've had experience with that part of it too, that
Right.
you see initially they'll go to the ones, but I think then the interplay between, for example, the Affordable Housing Board, the staff, and the development community, you figure out that maybe you need to mix that up a little bit
Right.
and get the balance as we move forward.
Yeah.
Well, there's language in the document, the policy document here that goes to giving extra credence to 2, 3, 4 bedrooms.
Preference.
Yeah, preference,
Yeah.
to that, so.
The
I think,
preference
I
is
think
kinda-
this might also help because if you have it set up to where the vouchers are there, that may address some of that incentive to create the smaller units because there are vouchers for those larger units too. So I think that from the board's perspective, it left the flexibility to do exactly what they wanted in the policy, which was encourage larger units.
Right.
Or more, not larger units, but units with more bedrooms.
More bedrooms, yeah.
But I think Tom's point that he brings up as we look at this new construction and we make the requirement of affordable housing, based on what we just did with the units down east, under the same criteria, one, it doesn't qualify,
Not even close.
not even close. But two, we need to understand that gap, holy Moses,
You could see it.
oh yeah,
The numbers that Matt pointed out versus what was up on that chart tonight, you
Right.
can see
that's it. And
there's a
so-
bigger gap.
So consequently, if at 50%, that project can't work.
But when you get into the affordable housing discussion, the very comments that were made tonight by Justice Matters is it's some level of subsidy to get you there to begin with.
You bet.
This is just another way of getting to that point. And so it plays off future dollars off of a development project. And it has, in my opinion, the biggest advantage, scattered siting affordable housing into neighborhoods instead of just pigeonholing it into one particular neighborhood in this community.
And I'll just use the word that Sarah used from Justice Matters, that this is a really solid start. And this is what we need to continue with. I think it's good in that regard.
On the, first of all, I really appreciate the the change on fair market rent. I think we finally actually address, and so we can finally have a conversation where when we say affordable housing, it actually means something. My one concern still remains that, as I understand it, and you can clarify this, but as I understand it, HUD, at the federal level at least, makes use of family median income instead of household income. Is that correct? And if you look at those two numbers, family median income for Douglas County is $20,000 higher than household median income. And if you look at, like for instance, the 2011 local economic profile put out by the City of Lawrence, it drew specific attention to this discrepancy and pointed out that we need to be clear with our terminology. That was 5 years ago, and we're still having this conversation today, and I don't think we've gotten anywhere with that if we're still making use of a family median income standard.
Well, and I mean, Shannon Oury, I'm with the Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority. The Housing Authority is required to use that number for our eligibility. So we have no discretion whatsoever about using that number. And it is based on family size, and then and your eligibility is a percentage of area median income, which is set just in our area, right, for Lawrence, Douglas County. So we have no discretion in doing that.
Okay. Any other questions of Shannon? Okay. Thanks, Shannon. Okay, any other questions of staff? You?
Yeah, I have a question. When we talk about the number of units required, depending on how large the complex is, we say 10% will be affordable housing, ranging from 4 to 49 units. Does that mean a minimum of 1 is going to be required, started at 4?
Yeah, does that round up?
Does that round up to 1? It's got
Yes,
4 to 9, it's going to be a percentage.
I believe it's worded that it's not less than 10%.
So minimum of 1.
There'll be 1 at.
Be 1. Mhm.
I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Have another one?
Well, I got a few
Please, yeah.
kind of little things that I looked through the document here on. On page 8, 1.72 and 1.73, we talk about compliance and the requirement for the applicant or the person getting the incentive to submit reports by January 15th. But we don't actually finish the report or compile all the information together and get it ready for PERC until May 1st. Is there a reason it has to be so long? Because, I mean, it seems like, I mean, we're supposed to notify the applicant or the person getting the incentive that they're either in or out of compliance and give them an opportunity to address that. But it seems like a long time, to May 1st, 3.5 months for compliance.
I can have maybe Britt comment on this as well, but I will say that the report, has really grown over the years and is really quite extensive. So once Britt gets those reports back from the applicants, she's busy inputting that into the report and even doing other analysis and check based on the data to make sure that the project is in compliance with the performance agreement. So there's a lot of checking of what our compliance agreements say and what the applicant has provided to affirm that they are in compliance, and then just putting that report together takes quite a while. So sort of by definition, we're a bit in arrears by the time that we get it completed, but our intention is to always have it done on that time frame, and then of course have it presented to the Public Incentive Review Committee and the commission. I don't know if you have anything more to add, Britt.
But a company could be out of compliance for 6 months almost before
Well, I think, Commissioner, we have to know at a point in time, I mean, we have to have a point in time where we are checking that. I suppose that if we knew that someone is largely out of compliance, that would be something that we would be elevating to the city manager, or for example, if we know a business has gone out, has left, those kind of things, obviously, we can handle. But if we're just only getting word when the applicant is submitting the certification, we do our best to make sure that that's in front of you all. And the applicant does have the ability to make a case to the city commission if they're out of compliance as to why they might be out of compliance. And the example that I have
We've done
used
that in the past, yeah.
Yeah,
that
okay.
is a local company that produces a product that was largely dependent on the residential housing market. And during the years when the residential housing market was down nationally, they had a good reason why they were out of compliance, which they made the case to the commission, and the commission decided at that time to say you're still going to receive your incentive. So there's kind of all those things that we carefully look at once we receive the information from the applicant.
Okay. All right, I had a question about the application itself, quickly. On the front, on the very first page, we've added several different items, boxes that you check to say you're doing this or that, providing anywhere from above average wage jobs to affordable housing. The one item you've got on here, sustainability and energy efficiency, those seem to be really generic to me, whereas, excuse me, every other item on that list has pretty definitive, it seems like definitive definitions. But sustainability and energy efficiency I don't see where it's really well defined throughout our package. And actually, if you want to get energy efficiency, we've got that in our code right now. So everybody's going to check that because they're going to have to build the code. If these items, the way these items look, it seems as though we're asking them, are they doing something above what we already require? And energy efficiency is something we already require. Now, sustainability as far as a definition for sustainability, I believe we should be requiring the LEEDs or equivalent certification of some sort. And so I would prefer to have energy efficiency taken off there because it's already in our code. But sustainability, I would like to see that on there with the word LEEDs after it or equivalent, because that's really a step up from what is currently required.
Commissioner Larson, are you wanting it to be actually documented LEED certified? Because
No.
I know a lot of our petitioners have said, I'll build to LEED, but
No.
I don't want to spend a ton of money to buy.
No, I think
The
we,
equivalent.
yeah, that's why I said the equivalent. I mean,
Yeah.
we've had that discussion quite a bit here.
Right.
And I've always said, I don't need to have the stamp on there.
expensive piece of
with-
paper.
Yeah,
That's
the
right.
expensive people. Equivalent is fine. Usually architects, don't they certify, or they don't certify, but they at least document. And that's fine with me.
Perfect.
But I would like to see something a little more definitive on there, such as LEEDs or equivalent.
Commissioner, I would agree that it's fairly vague right now, although sometimes vagueness in these kind of policies is somewhat helpful. If you do want to nail it down and have it be specific as far as meeting a LEED certification requirement, then you want to put that in the policy, obviously, so that we can make sure that that's followed up on. But I would suggest that with some of these things, just keep in mind that we are in a very competitive environment on a lot of these economic development projects. So to the extent that we have these in law and defined, and they may not be able to be altered, that may inhibit our ability to be competitive with some packages. So I would just urge caution with some of that as you look at these policies.
And I think to add to that, Commissioner, I'm sure you understand this, it's the same conversation with changing the rental basis. You're now basically have a lesser rental stream coming in. When you go to some sort of construction standard, sustainability standard, you've raised the cost of construction. Those things all resound themselves in the gap analysis, meaning that the gap is going to grow. So just understand that you're doing those things. And when we get into conversations about mentally trying to fix what the number should be, we're going to end up in the same place where we're going to be arguing about those types of things. I agree with you. And in fact, again, some of my experience, we ensconce those in the actual requirements.
And I'm for that, actually, putting it in there. But what I'm talking about is just this list right here. This list, you read it through it, it's everything that they can do that's not typically in city code or city requirement. You know, the above average wages, affordable housing, promotion of density, infill, and so forth. This list here exceeds our standards. So I think that putting the word sustainability and energy efficiency does not exceed our standard. Energy efficiency is our standard.
But maybe I misunderstood. I thought you were trying to achieve a certain level or equivalent, for example, base or silver or gold in terms of LEED.
I would like to see the projects do that. I understand, though, with the competition, I'm just saying on this very front page, they are checking off items that are above what is normally expected for a project for incentives. That's my understanding.
Right.
Is that?
We could make that, we could even add clarification to that, to maybe make that stated a little clearer here on the application, if that's the intention. I think we have offered the opportunity for an applicant to, kind of make their case on these issues and topics, and as they come up. For example, you may have a company that is actually producing something that is a sustainable product or aimed at that particular market. But all of those things can be included in the narrative that they submit with the application. But if the intention is that all of these things be above the, any base code, we could certainly make that clarification in this
Yeah, I mean,
list.
that's the way I'm reading this list, is it's above our standard requirements. And LEEDs is a sustainability.
This checklist at the beginning was proposed by the vice mayor, and it was my understanding at the time it was proposed is to provide a quick first blush of what the applicant considered to be public benefits. And then, if you'll notice, please explain in detail the project's public benefits and request letter. So this is just for them to explain and provide some additional data, whether or not you guys view it as a public benefit. I don't think that was the intention of this. This was just for the applicant to identify, and then for you guys to have a quick view of that, then look into the narrative just to get further explanation.
Yeah, my original thought was that, when we receive applications, we refer them on to other places. And to me, I actually only had two things that would have been on this checklist. And that was, if you could not check off any of those two things, then you should just not even fill out this application. You should go back to your project and figure out how you could check these off. I've been kind of keeping my mouth shut because there's obviously more than two things on this list right now. But I think this is a good start to get people thinking about it. I would like to see full-time jobs with employee benefits, but then again, if they're getting benefits, they probably are full-time. So I totally get what you're saying, that the project should totally be above and beyond what we're asking for if they want incentives. I agree with that. Just like we were talking about, if your whole project is going to get incentives and you're only going to have 2 units in there, well, maybe all of your units should be a protected class. So I agree with the above and beyond. I don't know if we could put up here that we have an expectation on the first page of this that your project will go above and beyond a standard project and provide good value for the community. Because I think that's what was confusing for Bob Shum's project the other week that I voted against it. People would say, well, it did have an affordable housing quotient. Well, you know what? That just lets you fill out the application and refer it to someone else. That doesn't mean I'm still going to vote on it. It still has to have a very good, large community benefit. So I don't know how we would put that expectation, but I totally agree with you.
Yeah, Lisa, I think your point has a lot of merit, though, that is there a project that could apply and not check energy efficiency? Right?
Yeah.
If you're building to
Everybody's
code,
gonna
which you
check it.
have to,
Yeah, you're gonna
right?
check
And
it.
so why have a box on there if literally every
I
single
know.
applicant is going to check that
Yeah,
box?
I
The
agree.
point of the boxes, to me, is to say what public benefit do you bring that you otherwise wouldn't bring just building a stock project built to code?
So are you trying to find out, with the language change on sustainability, remove energy efficiency, trying to find out if they, if an applicant is already thinking about some kind of leads certification.
Yeah, to get
That's
an
all
idea.
you're looking at.
Well, that's kind of, get an idea where they're going with,
Okay.
with it, is what I'm saying. Lawrence alone, we just put the library, that's getting ready to probably get gold lead. The county's built a public building that to lead standards. And now we are getting ready to invest millions of dollars as a city to upgrade all of our facilities. Why shouldn't we require somebody who wants public incentive to meet the standards we're actually trying to do as a city? That's what I believe we should be doing. If we're going to do it, by golly, folks who want incentives should be doing it.
Tom, we need a language that can address what Lisa's bringing up.
Yeah, and I think that's doable. We can
Okay.
take care of that as a
Good.
part of it. If you just add that to your approval motion, we'll make sure that's in there.
Okay.
I don't think that changes. One thing I want to circle back to, though, and Leslie, you were concerned about the protected status. Even if you imposed protected status, it probably wouldn't have any real impact. Here's why. The units that are in it are subsidized. The other units will not be. I suspect that they will not be in a category that you could use a Section 8 voucher to even accomplish a rental. So I suspect that I just was discussing this. So I don't think at this point you're not losing anything.
Okay.
Because you're not going to get in there with a voucher in the other units because they're that much more expensive.
I was going to say, where would the rest of the money come from?
Yeah, exactly.
Just thinking out loud, but, oh well, okay.
Okay, just a few more
Yeah, please.
questions. On page 21, on 3.6.4.1, under record keeping, I noticed that we only require them to keep records for 2 years. Is that standard, or is that enough years, given the situations we ran into recently?
I don't think there was any change made to that number of years from what we have been doing. I don't know, I don't know if Tony has any more suggestions as to the duration of time we require, but 2 years is the
seems
number here,
light.
and I think it has been the number that's been in the policy for some time.
If we're giving them incentive for 10 years and we get 5 years into it and find out they've been doing something out of compliance, we can only go back 2 years. I think even the IRS has longer.
7.
Stuart?
3, is that what it is?
I would just suggest that we take a look at that and lengthen the number of years if the commission,
Do you think it should be 3?
I don't know, minimum.
Well, I guess my question on that is, do we work with this stuff to find out whether there's compliance or not within 2 years? If we checked it and there's compliance,
Do we audit it every year,
that's the question I've got.
every other year?
We do not go out and audit the records. There is a certification process every year, which is the materials that the applicant submits that certifies what their level of compliance is on an annual basis. Anything more to add to that, Britt, that you would have? The provisions here are things that in the event that we had a concern about the number of employees, that we would have the ability to go in and check those records if we needed to.
As long as you have access, maybe the approach would be that we do more of a random spot audit, so that it's just another
If you're not going
test.
to do it every year, then 2 years is a pretty short period of time.
Yeah.
That really is short.
It's really hard to regulate for future potential deceit. We can't sit here and figure out every what if.
No, but I just, 2
It'd be
year,
nice, but-
even for the state, we were always required to keep records for 5 years, paper records. IRS, 3 years. 2 years just seems awfully short. And I'd
We
like to
could
see it
certainly increase this.
increase it. I would like to see it increased.
I would figure that most employers would have these for longer than 2 anyway.
If the IRS is 3 years, do you want to do 3 years?
That's fine. I can, just anything to lengthen it. If the commission.
3.
I'd go with
What?
3.
3.
Yeah.
Okay. What other questions?
I think that's it.
Sure. Okay. good questions. Okay, anything else? Okay, thanks, Diane. Okay, any public comment on this item? Please?
Again, I'm Bob Harrington, and I live at 2023 Hogan Drive in Lawrence. And I will reiterate that I've lived here 37 years, and I guess that to some extent, I've heard the word used, public interest, and I guess I am concerned about the public interest with regard to this topic about economic development and incentives. And I've, read the article in the Lawrence Journal World by Rochelle Valdiverdi. And in general, I'm delighted that something's happening with regard to the issue of abatements, with regard to development. And in that regard, I want to thank Tom Markus because he held, I'm calling it a town hall meeting at Haskell Indian Nations University recently, and I attended that, and I thought he did a good job there listening to us on a one-to-one basis, and I would encourage that would happen again, and I talked to him about the issue of abatements there. And I'm also delighted that it was held at Haskell, because I think we need to fold Haskell into this community a whole lot more than we do. So I know there was an intern that was involved in that and other people, but kudos to the intern and kudos to the other people who thought of that. That was a good thing, and kudos to Tom for being there. I also want to thank the commission for taking up this issue of abatements, because I think it is an important issue. And I've listened to a lot of the terms, and some of the terms I hear from Tom about issues of clawback, and I like that term because it smacks of accountability. I've also heard the issue of reviews, and that maybe we just have informal reviews or not on a timely basis, just whenever. That doesn't smack of accountability. Accountability is about regularity. You can count on it. That's why it's accountability. Count on it. There will be clawback. And if you don't do that, then anything can happen. And as a person who, the people who are getting the abatements, they're getting the abatements from you, and all of you, and me too, because we're the public. Now today, I was listening to the National Public Radio, which I love, and they happened to have a segment on there where the current director of FEMA was talking about something very similar to what we're talking about tonight. And his name is Mr. Fouquet, and he will be resigning shortly because the administration is finishing its leadership shortly. And what they were asking him was, what would you recommend regarding FEMA? Because they're into risk analysis. And also they're into covering costs of developers when things don't go right. And what he said was, developers rave about capitalism and how they're capitalists. But what they really want is socialism, because they want somebody else to pay for the risk. And he said, what we need to do is incentivize them to be capitalists, more capitalists than they are socialists. And I thought, wait a minute, we need to play this at the city commission tonight. This is the guy who's done it. And he said, and we're not doing that because we're covering stuff that's really risky. The insurance companies won't cover it. What does that tell you? Private sector won't cover it, but the government's going to cover it. We're the government, and we're going to cover risk. So I guess what I'm saying is I like what I read here in this article. I did. And I like what I've heard here tonight. But what I would say is this. The term I want to leave with, two terms. One is accountability, okay, for the development, okay, whoever's doing the development, and evidence-based. Evidence-based means, I heard the term public interest checklist. I've heard checklists for sustainability. I teach classes on such things, checklists and so forth. You know what a checklist gets you? A checklist is boom. And it's my word. That's not accountability. That's just, I'm telling you. Same thing with the statements that we say they're going to certify. That's just their word. We have to have accountability. We have to have evidence. So when we say public interest checklist, what I'd rather have is public interest statements about exactly what you're going to do and what you've done. It should be past, present, and future. What is your history with regard to development? Show me where the benefit has been. In other cities, if you've worked there, or here. What is the benefit here for this city in all the ways, in terms of sustainability, in terms of low-income housing, in terms of better jobs, in terms of improving the community? All these things we're talking about tonight. Show it to me. I want to see the evidence. Not just, oh yeah, we'll have this. That doesn't cut it for me as a person who's lived here for 37 years, paid taxes for 37 years. I want to see evidence of it. I think furthermore, it shouldn't only be past history, but it should be current, ongoing. What are you doing now through the process of building? Because we've had circumstances, I won't name them, in town here where things haven't gone perfectly as buildings have been built. What is going on in terms of you delivering on the promise? And there should be regular updates on that. And finally, we hear about 2 years out. That's not near enough time to know if, in fact, they delivered on the promise. I think it needs to be more than that. I don't know what it should be. I'll leave it to your ideas on that. But it should be something substantial enough so that they're getting the abatement, and at least we should be able to go back and I like the term that Tom used, the clawback. You didn't do it. And so if you didn't do it, where's the penalty? And I think also with regard to that, what's the future then if you come back to us again and we find you haven't lived up to your word? You know, you've done a little bit of connivance here. You've set up an LLC at 4.99, and that wasn't the intent here, okay? And I think we have to look at all that stuff because I think it's our job as citizens to be wary and be careful about how we spend the public finances. So I guess as a public citizen, public interest, 2 words I want to leave you with: accountability and evidence-based. That's really what I want to see. I hope we'll see that. But I know we're moving in that direction because I keep hearing about it, and I can hear from your tone here that it's on your agenda. So I'm heartened for that. So thank you for your work on this. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan?
Dan Dannenberg, 2702 University Drive. We're trying to play Major League Baseball here with a double-A team, and it isn't working. Commissioner Soden's question about the LLC on item 7, I believe, of the consent agenda was never answered. Behind every LLC or entity like it, there are individual owners. And you have to have a staff that can peel back the onion and find out who those persons are. Now, the Secretary of State used to require that corporations make a filing at their office showing who the owners of a corporation are, who the officers, who the directors are. Now, I don't know whether that's still in effect or not.
It is.
That
It's
information,
required April 15th every year.
well, you simply go online and find it then. And that information should be there. The second thing is, we hear a lot about a food desert. Well, we have an information desert. I have no idea, probably because I don't know where to look. I'm not that smart. How many rental units do we have in Lawrence? 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 4? How many of those units do we have? Who occupies them? We have a substantial number of units probably occupied by KU Student Wildlife. The university is making no contribution to the staff to monitor rental housing or anything, to the best of my knowledge, and they should be, because they are having a profound effect on the neighborhoods in this city with their student rentals. So we need that information to start with. Number 2, or number 3, I don't know which number I'm on, I have a problem with having commercial and residential incentives in the same box. I don't know that that works. rental registration, or whatever it is, it's a complete joke as far as I can tell, but rental properties should be regulated by a separate entity. The day is coming when rental properties are in the same category as a public utility. I recently heard a talk show on the radio in which a woman called in from San Diego. She said, I spend 50% of my income on my rent. She said, we are starting a movement here in San Diego to have rent controls. We are, if the buffoonery in Topeka would permit, we need to have a mechanism or an authority that has an eye on the level of rents, what kind of, rent controls we need. I don't know who owns these rental properties. I heard that there's one developer here in town who's a prominent person who has a house in Lawrence, a house in Chicago, and a house in Florida.
They're allowed, aren't they?
Well, they're wealthy. I heard another landlord expound a lot on the number of cruises he's had over the years to the Mediterranean and other places. Well, I think he owns a property that is essentially a vacant house. And there needs to be a provision for constructive abandonment and forfeiture when a property is vacant and not up to code for a certain period of time. That period of time is 6 months. Now, state law would not permit that. And we know that the owners of the city commission, basically the developers and the landlords, would not permit
Dan,
that.
I'm going to tell you something. I take offense to that.
Good.
I
I'm glad
take
you
offense
do.
to that.
Because
And I want you to
offense
understand.
you.
Oh, I know you do, and that's fine. But I'm telling you what, I am not owned by anybody. And I want you to remember that, okay?
Well-
I want you to remember that.
If that is true, Mayor, let me respond to that. We would
telling you.
not have in the city code a 6-year period between inspections of rental properties. Why is that there?
Because the commission voted on it. We're done. Other public comment? Anyone else?
I'm Bill Fleming. I'm general counsel with Trainer Architects, and I'm the guy down here asking for a lot of these incentives, as you guys know. And we've worked with the city to do several projects in downtown. I think we've always done what we said we're going to do, and I think they've been very good additions to downtown Lawrence. And I realize there's some people that think that and some that don't, but that's kind of the nature of Lawrence, Kansas. So what I would like to just comment on, and this is more just general observation in terms of the policy, is when we do a project down here, the standard, as I understand it, is if you own more than 5%, you haven't paid your taxes, then we're not going to give you incentive, which I understand the issues there, and I'm not here to argue that. I'm just here to point out some of the issues with the policy that's drafted. First of all, the way it's drafted, I think it says, Tom, that it says any interest, that, any financial interest in any entity that hasn't paid its taxes, and then it basically says that if you have to provide an affidavit if you own more than 5%, but it doesn't really limit in the way that's drafted that 5%. So I think there's just some clarification that would be helpful, I think, especially for the staff when they go to try to administer this rule, because I'm going to be the person trying to prepare the affidavits. So I think there's some clarification there. I'm not sure that 5% is a very good standard. I mean, if you have 5% of an entity, that means you're maybe one of 20 owners in that entity. And so I'm not sure that percentage is an appropriate percentage, but that's not my call. That's your call to make. But the bottom line is, if you have an individual that owns a piece of property and doesn't pay their taxes, I understand the policy behind not giving incentive. That seems to me to make sense. And, if you have an individual who has control of an entity that's not paying its taxes, then that seems like makes sense to me as well. But you do have a lot of situations, like in our situation, where we have, most of these projects, we have 10 different owners in most of these projects because they're syndicated. We go out and we raise money from people in the community to put money into these projects and invest in these projects. We do take a lot of risk. I think there's been some discussion that somehow we don't take a lot of risk, but we do take a lot of risk. And then we have those 10 people, obviously, in a situation where if they own one deal out there that they are a 5% owner in and it doesn't pay its taxes, then that triggers all of this result where you can't get that. And so maybe it's not as big of an issue at the time you make the application, but certainly if you're looking at some type of a clawback provision, then that would be a problem. The way we finance these deals is if we build a parking facility, for example, and typically we're down here asking for incentives to build parking for downtown. Downtown is in an urban overlay district. It does not require developers to build off-street parking, at least that's your current rules. And so what we typically have done is said we need, some assistance. And I think it's good, I think it's good for the development because it has parking that's being provided. It's not putting a burden on the other parking that's downtown that's already there existing. And I think it's also good for the city because if you use a tax increment financing district or an NRA or whatever mechanism you use, then you're spreading the cost of that facility over your 3 taxing entities, which is your school district, which has about 40% of your tax base, your city that has about 30% of your tax base, and your county that has about 30% of your tax base. So rather than the city paying 100% of the parking costs for downtown, you get to spread those costs among those taxing districts, which those taxing districts also have the benefit of that increased tax base, so that's fair. And that's an appropriate way to do things. And so, but when we do that, we actually pay all those costs up front. So it's a pay-as-you-go. So we front the money, and we have to go borrow that money from a lender. So we don't typically put, if it's a $4 million parking garage, which we have 2 of them over here, we don't put $4 million cash in that. We put $1 million of cash, and we go borrow 3. And so anytime you start talking about clawbacks or putting money back or anything like that, to the extent that, those are the kinds of things that will make your lenders nervous. And so it's not to say that you can't have a clawback, but the terms under which the clawback is provided needs to be very clear. It needs to be something that the lender can look at and say, okay, I'm comfortable that this isn't going to apply to this situation, or we can get an affidavit from this individual that says this isn't a problem, so it's not going to apply in this situation. But it just needs to be thought through very carefully in how you do all this. So that's my only comment, is just to make sure that the policy is clear and it doesn't impinge on those are very important financing issues. So.
Thank you. Other public comment? No, we got other people.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name's Katie Walsh. I'm speaking only for myself tonight. First of all, I wanted to thank the Affordable Housing Advisory Board. This is what we've been waiting for. We now have a local definition of what is affordable. This is great. We have something to work from. I too wish we'd had it a couple months ago, but here we are. So I appreciate the staff and the board doing this work for us, and also all the faith groups in town who have been working for years on affordable housing through Justice Matters. Those people just don't quit. So thank you to them also. I have 3 concerns. I wanted to bring up that when a developer makes use of the federal affordable housing tax credits, they're required to be affordable for a stated period of time. And after that, the building or the buildings can go to market rate, even luxury market rate. And I know I brought this up before, and Mr. Markus has said, take what you can get. You're trying to get more affordable housing, and yes, we want that. But I think we also, if we do grant incentives for affordable housing to developers that are using the federal affordable housing tax credits, we need to take the long view and think, where do we want a lot of luxury apartments in our city in the future, 10, 15 years down the road? So that's just something to think about. When Diane was, this is number 2, when Diane was up here, and I may not have heard this correctly, Diane, but she was saying that if nonprofits are involved, in a project providing primarily affordable housing, the fees would be waived. And so my question, if I heard that right, if tenants to homeowners and/or the Lawrence Community Land Trust is involved with the developer and, you know, doing some sort of partnership on affordable housing, would then that developer get their fees waived? I think this is funny because now the magic word is affordable housing, and Rebecca Buford never could get her phone calls answered. Now everybody wants to talk to Rebecca. I think it's great. But I'm just unclear on that, fees being waived, you know? And then maybe I have 4 points. Commissioner Larson, I am so with you on raising the sustainability standard. And I also want to bring up tenants to homeowners again who build sustainable, affordable, completely accessible housing, and not on a massive scale. So they don't have, you know, they're doing it in town right now and have been doing it for a long time. I don't know why it seems so difficult. And then lastly, Mr. Markus has brought this up many times before when we talk about affordable housing, that we have to be careful not to cluster all the affordable housing in one area, because we know that's not healthy for a community. In years past, and you can drive around East Lawrence and Pinckney and see the houses that were built as low-income housing with federal money. They don't have front doors. They're 2 units and the doors face the sides. So every kid who lived in affordable federal housing lived in one of those houses with no front door. Those were the days when all the poor people lived in East Lawrence and North Lawrence and Pinckney. Now I think we're smarter, and if we give incentives for affordable housing, we will look to put it all over the city so that we don't have these clusters, intense clusters of affordable housing in one area. Thank you.
Thank you, KT. Diane, you have a response to the comment there. I guess I was under the impression that it had something to do with economic development or job production or something like that, but it has more to do with, you can answer the question.
I think the question had to do with how how it was applicable. Excuse me, I lost my train of thought. To nonprofits, and the policy as drafted just says that the city commission may waive the fees related to IRB origination fees, and you always have the ability to waive those fees if you so choose, if an applicant requests anyway. But there's a specific statement in the policy about nonprofits and other entities that it may be waived. So there's kind of a, and again, we're thinking there along those lines. The hospital routinely asks the city to issue hospital revenue bonds, and you all may want to consider waiving those in those cases.
Okay.
This is on here where the applicant is a federal not-for-profit. So I guess not just a partner, but the applicant.
Yes, right.
For the IRBs at least.
So we debated that this afternoon, like so many other things. And I like May when it's on the city side. And I like Shell when it's on the other side. But in the case of this May, I think the intent is that those would typically be waived. But we tried as we might, trying to find an exception to the rule. We didn't necessarily find it, and so we still stayed with the may, because I think it still retains discretion. There's always something, quite frankly, that we haven't seen, and so the may on our side gives you the ultimate discretion on those things, that you may see something that just doesn't fit what the thought process was when we were going to waive those fees.
Right.
And who knows what the composition of a nonprofit might be going forward.
Yeah. Okay. Melinda, did you have your hand up next?
I have.
Yeah, please.
So good evening, Mayor, Commissioners, staff. I'm Melinda Henderson, and I live in Brook Creek neighborhood. And I think most of you know I've followed economic development since about the year 1999. So I have some comments and a couple of questions on the policy. And I think I'm just going to kind of just go through it page by page and just point out. It's just little minor stuff as far as I'm concerned, but I do want to get some answers. Plus, I wanted to respond to a couple of questions that had already been brought up. So when I look at the policy on the affordable housing set-aside requirements that Commissioner Larson had asked, I could not find language that said one, at least one. All I see written is no less than, which I think you all might want to take a look at that, because then, oh, thank you for nodding. Then I think, because 4/10 of a unit, you can't round that up. So I would like for you all to take a look at the language on that. And the same goes with the 50 or more. I think you need to be very clear that you intend to round up, because it would take 54 units at 15% to get over 8.1. 53 is 7.95, which I think, in the real world, people would probably consider it. So that's my suggestion there. And I used to write policies and procedures, and that's where a lot of this focus comes from. So when all the boards and commissions and groups were reviewing this over the last year, I think the focus was mainly on the incentives portion and updating the incentives portion. And I don't think the general policy statements were really reviewed at all. I don't recall that they were. So in part one, parts 1.1 through 1.4, or through 1.3, I would like to see us have a discussion on those sometime soon. I don't think the language has really been revised at all since 2009. Under 1.3, economic development objectives, I don't see any objective that says jobs for local residents. And I would like, I know, Diane, you use the phrase primary jobs a lot. And I know not all economic development incentives are granted to provide jobs, but I would like to see some language about jobs in there. And when I was reviewing A through F, D, to encourage high technology and research-based businesses, that just doesn't seem to fit in with the rest of that section, section 1.3.1. When you get down to 1.3.3, we've got the types of businesses identified. So I think it's really redundant to have D in there.
Let me ask something. Tom, at the direction of the commission, did the commission give direction to review all of the policies of this, or we didn't do a complete change or a rewrite of the entire deal here?
I thought the focus was on
Affordable
the
housing.
incentives and the affordable housing issues.
Right.
but
Oh, okay.
So
have to
if
look
in
at the-
answer to your question, I don't think it was ever reviewed by anybody.
Right, and I always thought, since we're updating the entire policy, that this is part of the policy, but that could be a misunderstanding on my part.
Melinda and Mayor, I think maybe Diane could add something to the conversation.
So, so Melinda is correct. We really did not review any of that language except for that, as I indicated, in our looking at how should these policies be adopted and talking with the legal staff. That's when we thought we would put all of this together in one resolution, which is why those goals that have been the existing goals, we made no changes to that. Are in there. But one other comment that I would make, I know that we are currently reviewing the city's comprehensive plan, and that could very well, trigger some changes in those things anyway to mirror that plan, because there's a lot of references to Horizon 2020 in here. So that may be something just to kind of keep on the radar screen for the future.
And I heard Melinda's comment that that's something that we should look at. I agreed with that.
Okay.
Got it.
Thank you. And I agree with, because this does kind of tie in with Horizon 2020 a lot. And those were the only two things, actually, that I found. I just want to make sure that, since this all started in 2015, that we hadn't missed something. So thank you for that. So now on page, okay. I think I mentioned this, gosh, I don't know, earlier this year. One of the things I would like to see in the annual performance report is the information on zip codes for employees who work for businesses that got tax abatements. And it's not a requirement that they have to hire from within certain zip codes. But at the time I said, I think we need to know if we're creating local jobs, or are we creating jobs for people outside Douglas County? And it's data that should be pretty easy to get from an employer. I don't know if it needs to be put in the performance agreement, because I'm not sure how you would write that in. But as a taxpayer, I want to know if we're giving tax incentives, we're creating jobs for people who live here, who need them. And I don't know what you have to do to make that happen. I'm sure it's too late this year, since Brooke has already sent everything out, but I'd like to hear a discussion on that at some time. And I couldn't quite, figure out where to put it in the policy, but I think it could be inserted, and I don't think it would be a real undue burden if they're, providing, all the wage data anyway. I'm pretty sure the zip code would be easy to pull out. Under the benefit cost model on page 10, this is the only place I've seen local labor market mentioned at all. And I think that's really important that, wherever, it kind of goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, we're not really talking about jobs and local jobs. So again, that's another one of the reasons why I would like to see the zip codes. I think just about through here. On page 20 under 3.5, property tax abatement review criteria. Again, and this might kind of go to Vice Mayor Soden as far as, what we're asking for and stuff. On that checklist, we do have primary job creation. Do we want to see anything about primary jobs under section 3.5.1? Again, I just want to make sure we're that we're focused on creating the primary jobs for local residents. And that was just a suggestion. Page 22, I know the original, well, the latest policy, I think, was in 2009, so when this was written, we were using 2009 as baseline. So under the abatement amount and duration, under 3.8.1, we're talking about $7 million in adjusted $2009. Is that okay, or do we want to move that up to $2017? Just to keep it current with the policy date. I'm not sure how that would affect the amount or not, but it's something that I don't think we've discussed. Is that something we should look at? Under 3.8.2, we had adjusted $2,008. And then under B, we're back to a different amount, adjusted $2,009. And this all goes with how you could get, a little bit more of an abatement. So I don't know how that would affect things, if that would affect the amount or what. That's above my pay grade here tonight. On page 23, 3.8.3G, a proposed project that provides exceptional wages. What's an exceptional wage? We have primary jobs, we have the wage floor. I'm not sure I understand what exceptional wage is. I think that's in the eye of the employer and the employee. So that language might want to be refined a little bit. And with that, I think that answers all my questions. I really would encourage you to please consider gathering data on the zip code. I think that's really important, just to make sure we're on the right track when we're granting incentives. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions, Melinda? Okay. Thanks, Melinda.
Thank you. And thank everyone for all the hard work that's been put in over the years.
Thank you. Britt?
I was just going to address a couple of Melinda's questions. As far as 3.8.2, where it talks about adjustments in certain dollars, that deals with inflation. Those dollars are always adjusted as we're looking at every application. We need some kind of baseline, and then the CPI is applied, and then that is adjusted. And when the technical report comes to you, I usually put in parentheses what the actual current year dollar amount is. So those are definitely adjusted for inflation. The second thing on page 23, G, that the proposed project provides exceptional wages given current market conditions. This would be something, every year the Department of Labor puts out a wage survey. They do it for our MSA. They do it by occupation, specifically by occupation code. So exceptional wages would be, if we look at what the average is for a particular occupation, particular industry, and we have somebody who's going to bring in wages that are just way above that, that would be something that would be brought to your attention in the technical report.
Just a few other responses. I think with regard to Melinda's comment about the affordable housing provisions and the 10% language, I think in order to clarify that, we could just simply add that it would be at least one. That would clarify it. So that would be my suggestion. And as to the zip code issue, what I would recommend is if that is something that we would like to collect, that we have that as a requirement, and then that would be something that Britt can require an employer to provide us those reports. There's nothing that prohibits us from asking for those reports now if employers are willing to provide that, but it's just we don't have any ability with the existing applicants to require that information. But on this topic, I would just like to remind everyone what a transient workforce that Lawrence has, both in terms of our inbound employment and our outbound employment. We have a very high percentage of our workforce inbound and outbound on a daily basis, and that's just part of our local economy, so to be mindful of that. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, I would suggest that if we are requiring that information be collected, that be part of a requirement in a performance agreement. Again, going back to the previous companies that we've done this for, we can ask them for that information, but it would be purely voluntary. And then the other thing that I also wanted to just maybe give you something to think about is we have in this community a shortage of skilled labor. And so if we get to the point where we are really dictating who a company can hire from where, it may severely limit our ability to be competitive. Because one of the major reasons why companies come to a town is because of the labor force. And if you're going to put restrictions on that, just be aware that that could create some competitive disadvantages later on down the road.
It'd be interesting to see if maybe that's something that Peaslee Tech Center can start providing if we are short on some kind of, so the data would be useful, but not necessarily used in, like a clawback kind of fashion or anything, but just some basic numbers would know what we're lacking and what we may be able to provide.
Yeah, I think Melinda's point is to find out the information, but never was the intent of being able to hold a company to require that happens, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, is there any other public comment? Sure.
I'm out of paper.
Again, I'm Bob Harrington, 2023 Hogan, Lawrence. And really what I want to say here is just something that resonates with me and that is an echo of what I had said earlier. I heard Mr. Fleming say he wants more specificity. He's an attorney. He wants more specificity with regard to clawback. That's what I was talking about, evidence-based. What do I have to do? That works for him. He works with developers. He's an attorney. But I also heard from, is it Melinda or Linda? Melinda. I also heard Melinda wonderfully specify specifics that she wanted to hear about with regard to economic development. And I thought that was a great job. Yes, and so all I'm saying is what I'm hearing is that other people here think that accountability and evidence-based is really important on both sides of the street, developers and people who are concerned about protecting the city's rights as well. One other thing I would say, though, is what doesn't work is when somebody says, oh, well, we can do affidavits, which I also heard just recently from Mr. Fleming. Well, the problem with affidavits is that's not reliable. Anybody can say anything, sure, under sworn testimony, and they'll say, to the best of my knowledge, I believe, and then when it comes to it didn't work, well, that's what I believed. I go back to what you said. What is it you're going to do? Show me the evidence. That's evidence. Sworn testimony is just what I believe. The other thing I also heard is that the remark was made, and I've heard a lot of remarks tonight, but none of them like this, was that it was made by Mr. Fleming, that developers, it was insinuated that developers don't take it, not insinuated, he said it. Developers don't take risk, and people have said that. I was here all night. Nobody said that. And I guess what I'm saying is that's evidence-based too. When you can make a broad remark, overgeneralized, hyperbole, ad hominem, that's not evidence. That doesn't work. And I think it goes back to what I was saying. Show me the evidence. And I'm showing the evidence. Nobody said that tonight. This gentleman didn't say it. I didn't say it. You didn't say it. No, but you guys haven't said it. Nobody said, I know developers take risks, so does the city. And so it's two sides, and we're trying to balance it. The city has rights in this, they take risk, and the public that you represent takes risk, as well as the developers. So it's a balance, that's all I'm saying.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very
You bet.
much. And thank you for moving forward on this. It's
Thanks
great.
for coming. Thanks. Okay, is all the comment? Thank you all for coming tonight and sharing your comments this evening. Back to the commission. Okay, the item that we have before us is, we have resolution and ordinance. Is that correct, Tom? Both?
I think I mentioned to Diane to make sure that we gave you a motion that you could approve with maybe some qualifiers.
Okay. But one of the things that I want to make sure of from the commission is, at this point, any additions that we need to make or any suggestions of changes in the future, where they're going to originate from, the direction that we may give to have PERC hear something or whatever it may be, changes that may be coming to define some of the things that were brought up this evening as it comes back, and we have to amend resolutions or whatever it may be. I hope we can have that done in a timely manner, since there isn't going to be a second reading on that, on the resolution, so want to make sure that we do that. Anyway, Diane?
And I'd be happy to, if you'd like, if it would be helpful, Mayor, I took some notes on some of the things that I think there may have been some consensus about that you might want to include in a motion, if you'd like me to kind of recap that.
Sure, please.
So one of the things was with regard to the Affordable Housing Advisory Board recommendations. I think there was a desire to look at the December recommendations. Again, the draft policy includes the October recommendations. So I think you're looking for directing staff to include those December recommendations with the clarification on the source of that income limit, so that we have that document source cited. The other issue was the language in the application, that I think there was a desire to modify to exclude energy efficiency as a public benefit, but then also clarify that the benefit list should indicate things that are above and beyond city requirements. So we would put some kind of language in for that. The other issue was some annual affidavit from the applicant at the time when we are receiving their update materials for the year. The annual affidavit would be similar to the affidavit received at time of application. And then there was a discussion of changing the record-keeping requirements from to 3 years rather than the 2 years specified. And then if we also wanted to include the clarification on affordable housing that clarified the addition of the language "at least one," so that it was clear that at least one would be required.
And Diane, the record retention from 2 years to 3 years?
Yes.
Have that?
I don't know if I caught everything, but
Yep.
I think so.
Yep.
Anything else? Any
Thanks.
comments?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you know, this has been such a great process. It's taken a long time, but we've worked very hard on it, and I'm glad to see the policy is still retain a level of flexibility that I think is extremely important for us to be competitive with other cities across the state here. But at the same time, we've added some measures that we hope will help us in the future of making sure it's evidence-based, as you said, and that they're performing the way they should be performing. So I'm very glad that the policies come out this way with a few minor changes. I think we're well on our road to having a better policy.
Well, I think what I was hearing and have heard for some time is that with regard to incentives for economic development, there have been concerns in the community about the process that we've gone through to decide whether to do the embasements, incentives. What the cost to the community is, there's been great consternation about what is the cost to the community, and also what is the community benefit. I appreciate the staff work on this. I appreciate the input from the community. Hopefully, this resolution will provide clarity for the community in this process and help us come to a common understanding of what the cost of the community is and also what the benefits of the community are. The community as a whole, I hope, will embrace this new policy and try to understand it. I also hope that the development community will embrace this policy and appreciate the clarity that we're trying to bring. I guess incentives have been likened to tools. Tools aren't any good if you just leave them in a box. If we're not going to get anything done, if we're not going to use these, then frankly, it's been a great conversation, but we're not making any progress. If the community just doesn't want to do incentives, this policy is not going to help. I mean, the community needs to be willing to incentivize projects that provide community benefit. And I think that the development community is going to be interested in such projects, and I hope that we can all make progress together.
Anyone else?
Well, I was trying to think back when I first started working on economic development policy, and I think that was with 9th and New Hampshire, the Marriott Hotel, and that's where I just learned so much about our current policy. Then I got put on the Joint Economic Development Council, and that was fun. And so for the past 3 or 4 years, I guess 4 or 5, maybe 5 years now, I've been working on economic development policy and talking to pretty much everyone about it. And I hear people's criticisms, most of which are my own. So I'm just really grateful after 5 years to really see these things put into policy with guidelines. I think that's really important to have some kind of at least somewhat specific guidelines that are still flexible, but just instead of just, shouting out that there's a public benefit. Well, what is that public benefit? How much of this is a public benefit? Is it worth it? I think these are actually really good conversations that we're all having right now. Dan, I did look up the Cave in LLC, and that was Mark Gwaltney and Lee Hendricks are the people for the Secretary of State that own it. And then I looked up to make sure Lee Hendricks wasn't the cave at the Oriad Inn. So I did check that while you were speaking. But those kinds of things are what we want to get at. Absolutely. One of the things that came out of my mouth one day when we were here at City Hall up on the 4th floor, and we were trying to understand the LLCs and who owns what LLC and all of that, and how are we going to get at it, because Secretary of State doesn't have that. I literally want to know whose web I sit under, because it feels like a web all of the time. And the city, or the citizens, I should say, recognize that we are sitting under a web, and sometimes it just feels like we're just a cog in the machine. But I actually really feel like that we have accomplished something with this. So thank you very much to staff.
Matt, you have anything?
Wouldn't have a whole lot to add to what's been said.
No.
So I think a lot of time went into this.
Yeah. I want to thank every committee that heard this information and chimed in and come up with a very good policy for the city. And also being able to have the affordable housing component to it. I think that's something that, probably very few communities really have that. But it's something that is able to address that community need. And I think the changes, being able to help, that understanding, at least to the public, on how this process is supposed to work. I want to thank, the thought process that went into establishing what affordable rent is. I think that is so important. I want to thank everybody that was involved with that. I think having the consistency between the Housing Authority and City Hall makes all the sense in the world. So I think in the end, I think that we have a pretty good policy here, and I just want to thank everybody who was involved. So anyway, with that, we have a resolution to adopt on the policy. And then adopt on first reading the ordinance, correct? So we need to adopt resolution number 7184, adopting the City of Lawrence Economic Development Policy as amended as per the items that Diane had in her list, correct? And so I won't repeat all of those, okay? But we all understand what they may be, correct? Okay, so I would entertain a motion to adopt resolution number 7184 with the changes as outlined by the Assistant City Manager.
So moved.
Second.
A motion made and second to adopt resolution 7184 with those changes made by Vice Mayor Soden, second by Commissioner Larson. Any questions or comments? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0. The second part is to adopt on first reading ordinance number 9325, repealing sections of the city's code that are not covered in the economic development policy. Any questions or comments? I'd entertain a motion for adoption on first reading.
So moved. Second.
Motion made and second to adopt ordinance number 9325 on first reading, made by Commissioner Herbert, second by Commissioner Boley. All in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you all very much. Next
We should
item.
have a party.
Yeah. The next item are commission items. Any commission items?
It's our last meeting of the year. Just want to wish everyone a happy new year, and thanks to Tom for joining us in Lawrence this year. Best to you and your family.
Thanks.
We've had quite an interesting 2016, so thanks to the four of you for joining me on that ride.
Special thank you for putting up with me. So there you go. Thank you all very much. City Manager's report.
Yes, I have a number of items, but I'll try and keep it brief. Transportation 2040 plan, we're going through an update on that. That'll expire in March 21 of 18, so the new plan is required by the federal regulations to ensure the flow of Department of Transportation funding for transportation projects here in Lawrence and Douglas County. And we'll be following the MPO's public participation plan, which will give everybody a lot of opportunity to participate. ICMA, the International City Managers Association website, has featured the city of Lawrence and the county of Douglas, a collaboration on energy efficiency and sustainability. And they actually did a case study on our two jurisdictions presented by ICMA. And it highlights the work Douglas County and the city of Lawrence, Kansas have done in partnership with EPA's Energy Star program over the last several years to improve the energy efficiency of their municipal buildings. And we heard some of that in the discussion about the upgrades that we're working on here at the city buildings. The county, I think, previously had gone through some of that. There's a number of solid waste items. We collected, in the fall event, we collected 30 tons of electronic equipment at the fall electronic recycling event. 5.3 tons of paper was collected. And in kind of a rare collection process, we collected 165 pairs of eyeglasses, which will be donated to the Lawrence Lions Club. And we had some good collaboration with the Lawrence Arts Center, who designed one-of-a-kind collection boxes and a trophy for the winning school in terms of collections. I should mention that both the boxes and the trophy were from recycled materials, and the winning school was New York Elementary School, who collected 68 pairs of eyeglasses. So congratulations to the students and faculty over at New York Elementary for their hard work. We have an award announcement to make. Kathy Richardson, the city's solid waste manager, received the Outstanding Solid Waste Professional Award at the 2016 Kansas Solid Waste Management Conference for her outstanding contributions to the Kansas Sunflower Chapter of the Solid Waste Association of North America. Public Works Department has completed an update of the guidelines for plan preparation and design criteria for street and storm sewer projects. And at the Phoenix Awards, 6 awards were presented by the Lawrence Cultural Arts Center. In terms of future agenda items, just a couple things to note that will happen after the first of the year. The public hearing will be held on the parking garage assessments on January 3rd. The election of the new mayor and the vice mayor will occur on January 9th. And on January 7th, there'll be a public hearing regarding 1305 New Jersey Street. And finally, I wanted to just go back in time a little bit. I handed this out earlier to the city commissioners. And this was republished in the Lawrence Journal World on December 15th of 2013 from an original article that occurred in the December 15th, 1988 Lawrence Journal World. It says, city and county workers grew reminiscent today, this is from 1988, by the way, as they recalled a time when public employees had received copious holiday gifts from appreciative companies and individuals. We're in a whole new, or a whole different world than we were in 20 years ago, Douglas County Sheriff Rex Johnson said today. And then a quote from a friend of mine, Mr. Mike Wilgen. Basically, if it has any kind of lasting value, we don't allow it to be accepted, Mike Wilgen explained. Mike Wilgen worked with probably our most notable city manager, Buford Watson. We don't want anything that would tend to unduly influence people. Acceptance of liquor by city employees was also strictly forbidden. This issue recently came up, so history kind of does this great big circle here in Lawrence, like it does in so many jurisdictions, and quite frankly, this came to my attention. The actual policy, the employee policy, was updated last year, and showing incredible wisdom on the part of our city staff, they decided for the new manager to arrive to make sure that it was implemented. So somebody came into my office and said, we just got these plants and these popcorn, and what are we supposed to do with this stuff? And I said, like I would have said anywhere, and this is a very common policy, well, we really don't accept those types of things. And so we kind of worked through the policy, and you should understand that you have some employees that, you know, are having a little problem with the change. But I want you to remember, it wasn't that long ago that we had a pretty serious problem with gratuities in this community. It was called the, sports ticket scandal that occurred here. So I don't see the same kind of challenge necessarily in every department, every division in every department. But when we establish employee policies, we try to make them consistent across all departmental lines. And so I came down with the policy basically as it was written, and we're working our way through it. And I would hope that the public understands that, we're here to provide public service. The expectation is not for any gratuities to come our way. Public service is, I hope, the main reason all of our city employees get into this line of work. So I wanted to point that out. I wanted to tell you about a little bit of the history, and I wanted to tell you that this is not an uncommon policy most places across the country. And in fact, you actually had this policy in place at some point. And some point, I don't know how it disappeared, and the practice kind of worked itself back into our system where some places were receiving gratuities and others weren't. And I have to tell you, I understand that some people are more in that line of maybe where people want to give them a gratuity, but we have lots of unsung accomplishments by our city employees throughout the course of the year who are not in that public eye. They may be down in a ditch fixing a water main break or repairing a sewer line or showing up in some of the nastiest weather possible. They don't necessarily see that. So in my opinion, it's better to be consistent in our application of policy. And I hope our public understands that, and quite frankly, I hope our employees understand that as well. So I wanted to comment on that.
The amazing part about this is in December 15th of 1988, and I was in these chairs for an extra 15 days.
Mike, I didn't want to bring that up.
And what's really amazing is I went to the county, and one of the first things that, McKinsey told me about, the administrator at the time, was about the same policy. So and said that consistency would prevail. So anyway, thank you. Any questions of city manager on the report? Okay.
Did you say January 7th, a hearing for?
It's actually February 7th.
February 7th,
Yeah.
thank you.
It's all right.
No, you're fine.
I just have a quick question, Tom.
No, wait, you can do,
Popcorn as we're leaving?
Yeah, you'll get some popcorn. Just come on upstairs.
okay, well, any other questions of Tom? No. Okay, the calendar, any calendar items we need to add? You all have a great holiday, okay?
You too.
Everybody have a good holiday.
Merry
Thanks a lot for
Merry
your
Christmas.
work.
Safe.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
And a safe new year.
I would entertain a
Please.
motion to adjourn.
Use Uber
So moved.
or Lyft.
Second.
Motion made and second to adjourn, made by Commissioner Boley, second by Commissioner Herbert. All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all. And while I got you all, I have